Well, thank you so much for staying with us till this far. Let's now bring in our political analyst, Professor Susan Booysen. She is the Director of Research at the Mapungubwe Institute for Strategic Reflection. A very good evening to you, Prof. Thank you so much for joining us.
Good evening.
First of all, what's your impressions of the overall election process?
Well, it is a strange election campaign in many ways. We see so little real interaction, general campaigning. The bulk of images that we see is political leaders visiting poor communities. And it is almost obscene, seen in context. Yes, those communities' needs have to be addressed and they have to be taken more seriously. They have to be systematically represented. It would have been fine if we had known these politicians had been in communities week after week, sometimes day after day when those needs arise. But they are not. And suddenly when it is election time, now is the time to display the caring and to issue the promises of everything that will be done.
But I think, Prof, it's quite interesting because now these communities are starting to appreciate the fact that these political parties are only coming to visit them during the election time. So it's quite a difficult one, I think, for political parties now to actually think they will win the voters via the visits, via the giving of T-shirts and food packages.
Yes, the community people will always welcome, will always take those T-shirts. They will even wear them, as I know from research, from focus group discussions a while ago, wear them when they go and apply for jobs in hope that that will help them get jobs. So communities are going to take whatever they can get there. But the communities are very cynical and they know they are very unlikely to see the politicians again in the months to come. And it's exactly why that's the reason why we see these images of protest. We always, before each election, we see protests escalating because the communities use that. Sometimes use it, they call it the smoke that beckons, that bring the politicians close. If they burn tires nowadays, they're more inclined to burn buildings and municipal infrastructure because it becomes more and more difficult to get the politicians into the communities to look after the needs, even if communities, and they talk about it, if they can just extract some promises from these visiting politicians come election time, then they have a better chance to get the delivery satisfaction of their service delivery needs and many other needs after the election time. So it's an intricate game. It is not just parliamentary politics and representation in parliament and elections. South Africa is fascinating. It exists in many places, and South Africa is experts at this, to have these parallel streams of democracy, both electoral and direct action and protest, and through the combination of these two, they feel they're optimizing their chances of getting service.
And it is actually unfortunate that most South Africans, if not all, they show their dissatisfaction at their political leaders and their various political parties by abstaining. Do you get the sense then that the only way to deal with dissatisfaction is by voting a certain political party out? To get the sense that they understand and appreciate the value and the power that they have?
Yes, they certainly understand that. But simultaneously, because the ANC in South Africa is such a dominant party, and because of its deep legitimacy, it is fading somewhat, but historically very, very deep legitimacy, because of its role in liberation struggle, liberating South Africa in 1994.
So you have those loyal voters who wouldn't
deep loyalty. It is wearing thin in places, and it's definitely not stable. It is on a gradual decline. But because of that, that also contributes to these parallel streams of democracy, that people think, yes, let's rather use other methods to get accountability rather than alternate the political parties through elections. And it's also on that front that people often. Abstention is not a huge thing in South Africa. Generally, South Africa has been ranging above the 70% in its participation turnout rates. It's likely to be slightly down towards 70%
but
this
we've
time
had
around.
A number of young people, of course, saying that they are going to be abstaining. We're going to come to that, but I think we need to go to Limpopo now, as we do know, of course, that the IEC in Limpopo are currently investigating claims of dumped ballot boxes in Tzaneen.
Well, a member of the public found 3 ballot boxes on the roadside. We cross live now to our reporter Musa Mabunda.